Welcome to Better Sex, where you get the information and inspiration to create and enjoy your best possible sex life. Join your host, sex therapist Jessa Zimmerman, as she brings you expert guests, helpful tips, knowledge, and strategies to improve your intimate relationships. And now, your host, Jessa Zimmerman.
Hey, welcome back. It's another episode of the Better Sex Podcast. This is Jessa, and I want to just thank you for taking the time to be with me. If you haven't yet heard, I have a new on-demand webinar that I'm really excited about. It's called How to Help Your Partner Want More Sex Without Them Just Feeling More Pressure. And, it was a little bit of a journey for me to decide to do a webinar aimed at what we call the higher desire partner, because all of my work is with couples, right? In my practice, I work only with couples. And I'm so sensitive. There are two sides to this coin. There's a higher desire partner. There's a lower desire partner. You each have different experiences. They interact. You impact each other. There's work to do on both sides. And I was really hesitant to aim training at one person. But what I found out is that it isn't really. The reason I'm talking in the webinar to higher desire partners is because, first of all, often the higher desire person feels some urgency around improving their sex life, but also, maybe more importantly, it's the higher desire person that really has to change some things first. I go over in the webinar the most common mistakes that you are probably making that are making it almost impossible for your partner to join you at the table to resolve this stuff. So the first steps, the first shifts in mindset and thinking and even behavior really have to happen with the higher desire person. So it's not just, wow, how do I get on your side and help you have more sex? It's like, whoa, there's some stuff you need to do to invite your partner into this process. So if you're a lower desire person listening to this or curious, you're going to be very happy with this webinar. In fact, I encourage you to watch it. And I think it's going to resonate with you, and it's going to give you some ways to talk to your partner about things that they might do. You can have them watch it. Anyway, ultimately, it really is for both of you. But you can watch this if you're curious at intimacywithease.com/training. So I invite you to do that because that's a relatively new endeavor for me. Leading into this week's show, I'm talking to Leanne Kabat, who has written a series of books about the 5 seasons of connection. And her latest book is The 5 Seasons of Connection to Your Love Partner, so specifically about your intimate relationship. And it's a perfect fit with the Intimacy with Ease method because she is talking about, a lot of what she's talking about fits into what I call the align pillar, which is how are you a really good teammate with your partner, right? How do you commit to a win-win? How do you engage them in a process working towards a fulfilling relationship and fulfilling sex life? And so she's got this whole framework she's come up with 5 seasons of connection, really powerful, and then has identified sort of 7 areas of intimacy that come into play with your love partner. So we're going to talk all about that and the kinds of issues that come up and how you can implement some of these ideas in your own relationship. I hope you love it. And before we start the show today, it is sponsored by Intimacy with Ease. It's a method to help otherwise happy couples achieve a sex life that is easy and fun for both of them, so that you can actually just enjoy your sex life with 0 stress. For more information, if you want to watch a brief little training video that's available, all of that, go to intimacywithease.com. So Leanne, thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's really nice to reconnect with you after I think it's been at least a few years. So.
Oh, it's definitely been a few years.
You have been busy because I think you have put out 3 books now, right?
I have.
saw each other. So
Yeah. No, you were a speaker at MamaCon, and I'm so grateful for that. The women were so thrilled to have you, and they learned so much. So it just really inspired me at that moment after that event to say, what do I have inside of me that I could bundle up and send home with people?
yeah,
Right? Because there's one thing to be in a big event and really capture all the data, but you can't hold it all. You can't integrate it all. And so that event in particular where you spoke was one of those seed planting moments where I thought, I need to write the things that I want to say into like some cohesive, series of information. And that's ended up what I did with the 3 books. So,
right. So they're basically all about the 5 seasons, right?
They are. Yeah. So that is a concept that I created. And so each of the books targets a different demographic who can find examples of how they can use the 5 seasons in their life.
Right. Okay. So first thing that occurs to me that listeners might be thinking is, wait a minute, there are 4 seasons.
Right.
But like, what can you introduce the 5 seasons? Like, what are they?
Yeah, of course. So they came about because I was struggling. Like I have a brain condition. It's a neurological condition. And in 2006, after 8 months of testing, after like a particularly bad brain crash that I had suffered, they gave me 5 years to live.
Oh,
And I had, at the time, a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a newborn. And so there were many dark days. Like I can't even tell you how many dark days there were. Probably all of them were dark.
yeah.
I was sad and I was scared and I was angry and all that. And it just one afternoon hit me in this fire hose flood of inspiration that I can actually get out of those dark days, right? Like I have it within me to change the narrative of what I was saying. And so even though I was given 5 years to live, I really just started to see parallels with how I was feeling. It was dark. I was shutting everyone out. I kind of closed off all my friendships. I was isolated. I was, bitter and angry. And I'm like, wow, that is like winter. And I'm Canadian from, central Canada, and it is cold. I mean, I think Ottawa has the coldest capital in the world, right?
Yeah.
So I know cold. And so to me, I'm like, oh, that's winter. So what do we do after, a particularly harsh winter is we spring clean. Right. So then spring just became this time of where are the tools and tactics in my world that I can tidy up the mess that winter brought up and make it better because I want to get to summer. And being, a redhead with freckles, I am not actually some sun-loving, beach bunny, but the idea of just feeling the sun on your skin and, things blooming and people being happy and carefree, like that to me was summer.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I was noticing was I could be happy, I could be playing with my kids, life could be great. And then things start to slip and a cold breeze blows in or, some sharp words happen. And I'm like, oh, that's fall. So then I just rounded out the seasons by understanding how it was. And the 5th season really was the piece I think was, the divine inspiration piece in particular, because it's the place of power. So the 5 seasons comes with this crossroads. And so the 5th season I call the crossroads. And it is where you decide, are you going back to winter in this interaction or are you going to go to summer? And it's easier to go to winter sometimes. It's easy to throw your ego in the ring. It's easy to rip your partner and be like, it's your fault, you suck. Yeah. Or it's easy to yell at your kids and say, you don't know what you're doing or you can't do anything right. That's the winter path, but it's also the low-hanging fruit.
Right.
It takes a little bit more awareness and self-discipline to say, oh, I see you're having a hard day. Can I do something to support you? Would you like to have some space? What are the strategies that you need right in this moment to bring you and the person in the relationship with you to a place of summer? And that takes intention and purpose and discipline and awareness. And so knowing your seasons then allows you at the crossroads to make a better choice for an outcome that you desire, right? So you're not constantly falling into patterns of conflict or chaos or commotion and disconnection. You really are choosing, if I want the outcome to be connection and love and intimacy or playfulness or happiness, what do I need to do to get there in this scenario? And so just knowing my seasons for me changed everything. It became the foundation for the books that I wrote. It becomes the foundation for the coaching that I do. It really is just, you have it in you, right? What you have in your skill set, in your toolbox to get out of conflict or chaos, you already have. Let's add some things that might be more helpful, and then let's use the things you have, right? There's no point learning 700 new tools. No, let's really just customize something so you can spring clean naturally and kind of as an extension of who you are. And so that's the 5 seasons in a nutshell.
Yeah. And what strikes me about this is, unlike the year where we go through these same 4 seasons in the same order over and over and over again, that there's sort of a directionality about this, right? Like if you're in winter, you spring clean and get to summer, but you don't have to keep going through that, right?
No. There are many times, I mean, I've been doing this now for a very long time. So I will catch myself, and I go to winter. Like sometimes I'm like, I know that's not the better choice, but I want to win, I want to win this, or I want to make my point to to such a degree that I'm willing to go into winter. So I still go to winter sometimes, but then I'll say, I know the fastest way back to summer is this. So I can accelerate the spring cleaning. I don't need to do, big, long sweeping spring cleanings. I can literally pinpoint the thing and jump back to summer. So I'm a little bit more rapid fire through the seasons. And you could go through all 4 seasons all 5 seasons in a day.
Yeah, right.
You could do it in a conversation, right?
Yes, right.
But the point is that you have the power, right? The 5th season gives you the power to decide, how do you want this to go? And it applies to every relationship, obviously love partners, the one we're going to talk about, but also with your children and with people you work with, your road rage and, the people that you deal with when they're wearing masks or not wearing masks, like everything that bubbles up inside of you, you can deconstruct.
Yeah.
So it's just this really fascinating framework that I'm just so proud of.
Yeah. And so obviously there's power in understanding where you are. Mm-hmm. There's certainly power in realizing you've got choice about which direction are you going. Is it sort of different tools in each season, is in terms of what you teach and coach people with?
Yeah. So, I mean, we always start in winter because that's where people come to me. They're hurting, they're disconnected, they're angry, they feel wronged, they feel screwed, they feel, the universe is against them. They feel like they have some karmic debt they can never repay, so that's where people come to me with the feelings of just this, this angst. And once we understand winter for them, we really need to kind of peel it back a little bit. So if you come from a family where there were, raging, kind of outbursts all the time and a lot of instability, you have different spring cleaning strategies naturally than someone who, endured a lot of silent treatment or passive aggressive digs or parents who dismiss them all the time, right? So their natural coping mechanisms have developed differently. So we really need to kind of unpack a little bit of what they bring to the winter story, because it's not just about this conflict here, right? They do this in response to all the conflict they've experienced in their life.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So the spring cleaning strategies are, obviously dependent on the people, right? Some people are very action oriented and they want a checklist and they want an A to Z with no deviation. It's just been fascinating to see how people understand the seasons and integrate it in their world, and then what they kind of grab onto to move to the next season.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I mean, what I'm getting from what you're saying is that the spring cleaning there's some real work there. I mean, you might have to dig pretty deep and you really have to make this relevant to you. And not just gloss things over. So it's not just a quick sweep, right? It's sort of cleaning.
As spring cleaning is, right? I mean, in my house, when we spring clean, it's like wipe the baseboards, clean the windows. I mean, it's more elbow grease than, your regular Saturday morning, kind of tidy up. So I think having the framework of spring cleaning really gives people the message, like, you need to get dirty. You need to get sweaty. You need to dig in there. You need to uncover boxes you haven't looked at in a really long time, or pull things off shelves that you haven't dealt with, you just shove to the back. Yeah, spring cleaning is the place of work, but you do it because summer is the best it can be. It's that glorious place. And once you've had a taste of that kind of paradise in this relationship space with any of the people that you're spring cleaning the relationship for, you're like, I want that again. Like that hormone hit is huge, right? And you're like, I'm willing to do the dirty work. I'm willing to get in the garden and get my hands dirty and dig up all the weeds, because I know what it looks like to look out my window and see these like glorious blossoms, right? And so you do the work because you see a payoff.
Yeah. So what's different or unique about love relationships in this concept? I'm hearing that we can apply these 5 seasons to really any demographic or any sort of relationship. But what comes up in your latest book about love relationships specifically that maybe is different or goes deeper or you have to keep in mind?
I think the fascinating thing about writing this book was I expected it at the onset to be about the other person, right? And I would say, really, all of the research and all of the things and your laughter reminds me that it's probably 90%, if not more, about you, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as many times, and I have my own love relationship. I've been married for 23 years. So, I mean, there have been cross-country moves and babies and, stresses and deaths and lots of things going on. And it's almost never about the other person, right? It is about who I am and how I approach, how I understand, how I value. And so that was one piece, is just how deep my values that I didn't even know came into the relationship with my partner. And as soon as I saw it, it's, like the world became in Technicolor. So that was one thing. And the other thing is that there are actually, multiple layers to something like intimacy. And so often people would call me, and I'm not a relationship coach per se. I teach the 5 seasons, but people would call me and say, look, I read the parenting book. I'm wondering if this fits my husband or my wife or my partner. And I'll say, well, tell me about where you are and where you want to go, right? Like, let's figure out the journey that you're trying to cross here. And so once we dive into some of these things, the end result for almost everybody is we just don't have intimacy. In my book, I found there are 7 layers of intimacy. And to me, I think that was a game changer that this book provided for me when I'm dealing with, my clients and their struggles, because you can be highly physically charged with your partner and just be, fireworks all the time. But if you're lacking in other areas of intimacy, like finances, and it's like this very dark place that you don't have access to in the family financing world, or if you're emotionally disconnected, you don't feel the full spectrum of intimacy because you only have, one section or maybe 2 sections really ramped up. So once I understood all 7 components, it was easier for me to help people identify, okay, what's actually the intimate piece missing? Because it might not be what you think.
Right.
And so that, I think, was a game changer just in terms of my philosophy is, it isn't one thing. And so this book really provided me the foundation to say, well, which of the 7 would you say is the biggest part of your pain right now?
So it sounds like what part of what's different about this particular book within the 5 seasons framework is what's this picture of summer, right? Like what are the elements, because that's going to be a different relationship and obviously way more layered,
right?
Than your relationship with your child or certainly a coworker, right? Like
absolutely,
the whole vision of what summer would be is more complex.
Absolutely. And really, I mean, when we're thinking of our love partners, it's the most profound adult relationship in a love space that we've ever had. Right? Even if we had, a first love and a second love and a third love, the one you're in now is the most profound because you're in it now and you have all of your life experiences added to it. Your first love, you might have been 16 and you only had 16 years to put into it. Right. So it is the most profound relationship. And, research from the top CEOs on the planet have all said, if your, home life, if your relationship is falling apart, you cannot, excel in any part. You cannot be a world-class athlete. You cannot be a world-class financier. You cannot be a world-class thinker or philosopher or philanthropist, right? They really understand that if your love relationship is in terrible straits, if it's in winter, you feel like crap no matter how fabulous you look to the outside, right? Your internal guide is like, you're lying because your life is totally falling apart.
Yeah, when I think about sort of my greater purpose, it so ties to that because the quality of your relationship, if it's really working well, then you are freed up to make a difference in your family and your relationship in the world, but if it's such a drain, if it isn't like that, and so your resources get tied up in a way that you can't be as effective or as powerful in all these other places in your life. So we really do, I believe this, we change the world one relationship at a time. Yeah.
We absolutely do. And to understand that you have the control just takes it out of the victim space, right? Like,
Right.
oh, my partner treats me like crap, or my life is garbage, or I can never get ahead. I'm not good enough. I suck at this. You get out of that space because you can all of a sudden say, okay, hold on a second. I have more control than I think. And when I get into my spring cleaning mode, I can be like, actually, this needs to change, right?
Yeah.
And it benefits everybody, right? Because if you're unhappy in your relationship, chances are your partner is not feeling so deep, that you each suffer maybe differently, but still noticeably.
Yeah.
It's Jessa here, just taking a quick break. Thanks for listening. Are you interested in being a guest on the show? I'm always looking for people with expertise to share that could enrich other people's sex lives. And I'm also interested in hearing from people who have transformed their own intimate relationship and would want to share their story with my listeners. So if you've got something to contribute to the discussion and want to see about being featured on an upcoming episode, please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, and check out the Be a Guest details. You'll find everything you need there.
So what are the 7 layers of intimacy?
So I guess they're not really, you need one to get the other. They're just 7
categories of intimacy.
7 categories of intimacy, yeah. The first one is emotional,
Okay.
right? And so, we can talk about them later. But so the first one is emotional. The next one is spiritual. The next one is physical.
Mm-hmm.
Then we have intellectual. Then we have financial, experiential, and sexual.
Okay. A lot of those seem self-explanatory.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you disagree, but sexual, emotional, even financial. But I'd be curious what you mean by experiential intimacy.
So I found this one was actually one of the ones that crept into the end of the research. I didn't see a lot of research from other people about this. And I've read, many of the masters' books about relationships, and I've studied a lot of different papers on different components of what I wrote about. But this one really crept up kind of as a side blog that I found by accident from many years ago. And it really told the story of this person who, had many of the components of intimacy, but lacked like this shared culture piece. So they didn't actually find common hobbies and relationship connecting points, right? So if you think about a relationship as, one-on-one piecing, they really see experiential as how many different parts of the spider web can you two intersect at. So, can you go hiking and, have a picnic because you both love this and bring your camera equipment and stay late and do astrophotography, right? So it's how many points of shared connection can you make in the things that you love? So creating experiences that bind you together.
Yeah.
Because I know there's a lot of, there's many pieces of self-care and take care of my hobbies. And I speak of the 3 garden concept all the time about, I have my garden, my partner has his garden, and where we both overlap is a 3rd garden, right? So we actually I don't give up my garden to be married to him. It isn't 2 becomes 1.
Yeah.
The concept is 2 becomes 3.
Right.
So I will maintain my own personal garden. He maintains his personal garden. And then we have a shared garden. And people who are low on the experiential intimacy scale have a very small shared garden, right? So they don't have a lot of experiences or hobbies or shared dreams and activities that bind them together. The people who go kayaking every weekend and have brunch on Sundays and do wine tasting, on birthdays and, have these rituals built into their relationships score higher on the experiential intimacy scale.
Yeah.
Right? So it's different than physical, right? This is really like, do you believe in finding pleasure in the same ways that I feel like that I enjoy finding pleasure? And that could be, it could tap on other things, but experiences are really a separate category because as we know, to have healthy relationships, you need to come at this from many different angles. So having some core common, attributes of your relationship that bring you together and bind you in some happy place is something you can both come back to when things start slipping.
Yeah. What's interesting, I'm thinking about in my work as a therapist, right? And I work only with couples.
Yeah.
To me, it's a question for any particular couple of what's enough of that. Because I don't think there's one size fits all. Like some couples do tons of things together and others really don't.
Yeah.
And it's okay, right?
It's
I mean,
okay.
sometimes it isn't, but it's like, what's enough bonding or experiential intimacy for them, as
Right.
opposed to like, oh, other people are doing more, we're not doing enough. It's really about finding your own balance with that, it seems to me.
Yeah. The problem then arises when there's differences within the relationship, right?
Yeah.
So one person is like, I really wish that you would come running with me, or I'd love you to join my soul cycle class, or, can you come into a cooking class with me? And the other partner's like, yeah, that's not my jam.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So if they keep kind of rejecting those bids for connection, then it becomes an issue. But you're right. I mean, some couples, I have a client, I'm not working with them now, but they were cross country. So one lived in California and one lived in New York. They had very few times together during the year, and they were very happy, right? They were doing jobs they loved. They had, they didn't have children, but they each had a pet.
Mhm.
And, they came together at, various times of the year, and but their experiences were different, right? They did, a lot more intellectual bonding, and they did, online workshops together, and then they talked about it. So they really still found a way to create an experiential intimacy plan, even though physically and sexually they actually couldn't, kind of go deep on those layers.
Right. Right.
So yeah, they defined it for themselves.
Do you also believe that experiential intimacy is built through negative experiences, like going through a loss or a trauma, or is it purely, I mean, the way you're talking about it is it's the positive enjoyment, hobbies, but it also seems to me that people bond and connect through shared difficult experiences too.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely see that. It's not typically, so I don't put that as part of the intimacy plan, because of course you never want to plan for something.
Right. You're not planning some horrible thing to go through together, right? Yeah.
Just to bond, right? We need to deepen our relationship. Let's, run into a tree with a car. We don't want that. I think it depends on the negative experience, because sometimes the trauma is so profound, and that may be because the trauma itself is profound, or it really kind of is exacerbated because one person brings already a trauma wound to that, so if somebody was in a car accident, for example, and somebody died in that car accident, they would be very susceptible to an even deeper trauma if 20 years later they got into another car accident and nobody died, but they would be rattled significantly more.
Yeah.
Right. So in the intimacy plan, there isn't really space for that, because that really is a spring cleaning kind of, and that's an environmental piece for spring cleaning, where you break down what just happened and really kind of heal the wounds before you get back to summer.
Yeah.
Right. The intimacy plan is really forward facing, and it really is, I want to be deeper in connection with this person. Having a negative experience, and I mean, I have a brain condition, right?
Right.
I was given 5 years to live. I mean, that's super traumatic for me and my husband to constantly deal with every blackout and every pain and every new test that gives negative, data back. And it still wouldn't fit in the intimacy plan. But what it does do is say, oh, you know what? Let's make sure that we are connected in all the ways that we want to be. Right? Like, are we deep in all the 7 areas? Because to me, I want to be loving as deeply and as completely as I can with what I have right now. Right. And the trauma that happened does live in our relationship, and it lives in the seasons.
Yeah.
So in the book, there's 5 seasons, and there's 5 elements of awareness. And so the intimacy plan is in the element of awareness section, because it's, it really is more of a tool and a strategy to deepen your connection.
Yeah.
So the book has 2 parts for that exact reason.
Right. It also seems to me that people that maybe have bonded or really grown, gone through something together, and that's part of their intimacy, that's not all you'd want. Like you'd still want to be sharing positive, life-giving, affirming kinds of experiences together. It wouldn't be enough to survive some trauma and then never add to that.
Right. Yeah. And that's where the emotional intimacy comes in, right? Because then you get to a layer of vulnerability and, just that nakedness of your soul. So if you experience something, very negative and traumatic, you bear it all with your partner. That deepens your emotional and possibly your spiritual intimacy level. it wouldn't be something that you would put in an intimacy plan,
Right.
but
Right.
it definitely develops the emotional and spiritual intimacy if you have a spiritual component to your relationship. Now, it doesn't mean, you have a God piece in your life. It could be just nature. It could be creator or source. It could, it could be any religion. Spirituality isn't religious. It's
Right.
really just connection to the greater energies of the world. And that trauma piece can absolutely help develop and deepen your emotional and spiritual levels of connection. But you wouldn't necessarily create an intimacy plan, obviously, off of expecting that something bad would happen.
Right. Right.
But oftentimes, if there is a trauma and people pull away, or, sometimes you might blame your other partner, like if a child gets sick.
Yeah.
And, the one partner was responsible for the child when the child got hurt or sick. There is blame and, anger and resentment and contempt that grow in that space. Then you need to plant intentional pieces in the seasons, but then in your emotional intimacy, you're going to have to get vulnerable and offer forgiveness, right? And just acceptance of sometimes these things happen and we need to move forward. How do we do that and stay together? Because I don't want to lose you and I don't want to lose us in this trauma.
Right. So what's I think I have some idea of what you might say about this, but you've got physical intimacy and sexual intimacy as two different categories.
Yeah.
So would you speak to that a little bit?
Of course. So physical intimacy, I think, is overlooked, right? I mean, we think a lot about sex and how people can come together and what feels good. And I think that is become a little bit more mainstream over, the past 20 years that I've been working with people, for sure. But physical intimacy, I think, is often overlooked. And when I ask people, or when I ask my clients things like, when have you given, a back rub and literally just left the person to fall asleep and not crawled into bed and got all, cuddly and, wiggled into them? Or when have you walked through the streets and held their hand? Right? Like we don't remember that those levels of physical touch are some of the most fundamental moments of our kind of life and love experiences, right? Like a tender touch from a doctor or a nurse or a parent, a caregiver, a grandmother. We learn through touch, right? We put things in our mouths, we touch things to know what they are. So to really kind of turn people's focus back to physical without the sexual component. And I mean, we've been to couples therapy as a couple, and almost always, my experience and other people who I've spoken to, the therapist will say, let's take sex off the table for a little bit, right? Like that isn't the end goal. So if you're just here because you're not having enough sex, then we have different conversations to have, because you're not going to get what you want until we heal some of the other pieces that may be lacking, right? And if you think about the emotional piece, or maybe you feel financially betrayed if you just found out that your husband or your wife or your partner is a gambler, or, maybe there's an addiction there that you didn't know about, or maybe there's, a very deep emotional connection that your partner has with somebody else, right? There's nothing inappropriate, but all of those layers play into this kind of healthy relationship. But therapists that I know will often say, take sex off the table, cuddle, hold hands, give a foot massage, kind of touch gently, give them a hug, and then walk away. Like, don't have it be your effort of foreplay, right? Because you want a different outcome. Really give it and remove yourself so they can just bask in the love of being touched again without an expectation of it going somewhere. And, oftentimes very quickly, then the sexual piece will come back in, right? Because there is that deep connection and, we are driven to want to connect in that way. But if we aren't nurturing the physical piece, then it is easy to feel resentment or contempt, like, oh, I'm just getting this hug, or I'm just, getting this 30-second foot rub because I know what's coming. Okay, do I want this? I don't know. Maybe I'll pick a fight because I don't want it, and all of this is happening because we have lacked the physical intimacy piece that just is for itself. Yeah. Right. And,
well, or like you said, challenges in those other arenas. Right?
Yeah.
Like there can be so many obstacles to desire, and it's like really important to figure out what's actually in the way and what needs some tending, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because sometimes it's not what we think, right? Like oftentimes people will say, oh, my husband wants more sex and I'm not interested. I mean, obviously not qualified to do a therapist work, so I don't try to go there. But I'm like, here are some questions. Think about your answers, and then we can go from there, right? Either you come to me and we work it through because it really isn't about that, or I have, 80% of the time I will send them to people. And I'm like, here's a list of people I recommend. Please call one of them.
Yeah.
Right? Like this needs tending to by a professional. And, it's bigger than what you think it is. It's not just this, right? You've got other things going on. So it really, I think when you think about 7 pieces of, 7 categories of intimacy, it also gives you permission to say, actually, I'm not going down that road right now, which, I'm not going down that road that leads to intercourse or anything, because I have other things I want to talk about before we get there.
Right.
Like I want to check in with, are we doing things that make us feel connected as partners? Can we go on a bike ride, or can we do a hike or something? Like, can we both love to sail. Can we rent a boat and go out for an afternoon and really reconnect emotionally and spiritually and experientially? Because I want the whole package.
Right.
Right. And I think that's what people are starting to accept and get permission for, is they can ask for the whole package. They don't have to just settle for one piece of intimacy or 2 categories of intimacy. They can say, I want it all.
Yeah.
Right. And that is a really healthy reflection of knowing yourself and your needs and your relationship and what your relationship can give you.
And does the book provide ways to sort of scale these different things or rate and then create these plans? Is it, it sounds like there's a process in this book for people.
Yeah, there's definitely a process. And I mean, I was a teacher, so there's worksheets.
Yeah.
I can't get away from it. And in the course, so I'm just making a course where I talk through all of the chapters and all of the different activities. And I think the workbook with it is like 60 pages long. So it's, it's a course, right?
Yeah,
it's a 50 where you guys have to dig into all the different pieces of your seasons and of your 5 elements of awareness. And some of them are light and fluffy and just very fun and really kind of bringing out your playful side. And then some of them are like, oh, okay, this is heavy lifting. We need a shovel.
Yeah.
We need gloves and we need protection because we're going into those deep recesses of our hearts and our relationship, especially if you are a couple that may experience conflict or disconnection, and then you go to bed and you wake up the next day and it's a new day and it's all good and you're going to make coffee and you're going to, carry on, and you never really kind of process together what happened. What did it mean for you? This is why, what I felt, and this is what it meant for me, and this is what it reminds me of. Like, if you never do those kinds of activities, then you probably have many boxes on your shelf that you haven't dealt with. So there's going to be more spring cleaning for you. But I mean, it's absolutely worth it, right? When you have that summer experience and you're like, I couldn't love this person more. Yeah. I love them more today than I did when I said I do. And that is where the magic lies.
Right. So where do people find you? Where do they get in touch or, learn more about what you've got to offer?
Yeah. So I'm at the5seasonslife.com. So that's my website. And I have a podcast coming back. I mean, I had a podcast and it was on the parenting piece. And I'm like, this is bigger than the parenting relationship, right? So the 5 Seasons now has branched over 3 different areas. And it can be used in countless ways. I have people who call me and say, oh my gosh, I used this at my family reunion, in the summer, not this past summer, because we're very, quarantine friendly, but in previous years, they're like, oh, and I needed this in my family of origin relationships. I didn't realize when I got back into that family, we all took our old roles again. And I needed to put down boundaries. I needed to recognize who brought me into winter and so it was fascinating how the 5 Seasons takes on a life of its own. So the podcast is coming back out kind of with all the different branches, but I'm online at LinkedIn and Facebook and, all the places.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing about all this. It's a lot to cover in one interview, but I feel like we gave a nice, overview of the, of the concepts.
Yeah. If anyone has questions, by all means, they can contact me and we can chat about it, or I can send you some more resources. It's everything, right? Knowing yourself and what you want and then figuring out how to get there is just remembering all your potential for happiness and for love and for fulfillment. And that really needs to be easier for people. Like, I think we make it hard.
Right.
We don't need to. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
You've been listening to Better Sex. Please visit our website, bettersexpodcast.com, for show notes and additional episodes.
And that's a wrap for today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying the podcast, if some of this material resonates with you and you would like to make a difference and make sure that this keeps coming out in the world once a week, ongoing, there are a couple things you could do to show your appreciation. The first would be to go to iTunes and rate and review the show. That really helps us be found by new listeners when you review the show on iTunes. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/iTunes. The other thing I want to invite you to consider is becoming a Patreon. For a small monthly pledge, you get some benefits. So for $2 a month, you get advance access to every single episode. For $5 a month, you get a chapter of my upcoming new book. And for $10 a month, I host quarterly get-to-know-you and question-and-answer chats over the web, and you get invited to that. I would love to have your membership in that, become part of the Better Sex family. You can find a link at bettersexpodcast.com/Patreon, which is Patreon. Again, thanks for listening. I'm glad you're here. Feel free to comment, ask questions, get in touch. I'd love to hear from listeners. Thanks.